The urban conservation issue, setting aside the urban efforts, which you have really come forward with, the administration has, setting aside the agricultural responsibility for the moment in the sector, what about the commercial sector of the economy or the industrial sector? There hasn't been much discussion about that other than a recent newspaper story which talked about the bottling of water by Stanislaus County. There are probably other examples throughout California. That was the one that was in the newspaper. What are we going to do about that sector, the commercial or industrial sector, again, assuming this gets worse?
And they don't have lawns.
And they don't have lawns.
Well, many of them do have lawns, actually, and we've suggested that people start there. The way the regulations are set, it leaves it to the local community, the local agency to figure out the mix, because every community has a very different mix of commercial, industrial, and institutional. And commercial, institutional, it varies. I did one of the early hazardous waste small business programs, minimization programs, back in the early 90s when I was in LA, and what we found is every industry is very different, and that sharing best practices could yield substantial savings. And so we did a pretty good outreach program. We did the same in our solid waste, but we went from the notion and the reality that the commercial, industrial, institutional sector is as varied as you can imagine, and so it requires an individualized approach. So what we find is there are certain communities for whom they have a commercial sector. I'll give an example that came up in our hearings of food processing where they don't have yards, but they really have to use water for health and safety. And so we created in our resolution an acknowledgement of that would create a challenge for a community to meet our targets. We have other communities who feel that they're going to get a more robust savings from their commercial, industrial, and institutional sector than even from their residential sector, just because of the mix of what they have. Director Cowan may be able to talk a little about this 7x7 requirements that you all worked on back in '09. But again, it's so varied that we're leaving it to local communities to make a judgment, and we are trying to make sure that we're not unduly hurting the economy of a community, which is again why we focus so much on ornamental outdoor landscaping as sort of the low-hanging fruit, if you will, for being able to achieve substantial savings without undue economic burden.